The day before the National Conservatory auditions, the spoiled heiress who constantly acted like a fragile toddler secretly detuned every grand piano in the practice wing by a full half-step. Lola just thinks a piano tuned down a half-step sounds so much gentler. This way, everyone's music will sound as beautiful as a sweet lullaby. In my past life, my ears caught the sickening pitch the second I sat down to practice. I immediately reported the sabotage to the faculty, and professional tuners worked through the night to fix every instrument. Stripped of her precious, gentle aesthetic, Lola threw a hysterical fit, swallowed an entire bottle of prescription sleeping pills, and died before the ambulance even reached the hospital. To avenge her, my entire class conspired against me at our graduation gala. They spiked my drink with a lethal dose of industrial alcohol. When I woke up, my childhood best friend had bound my 10 fingers with heavy steel piano wire, tightening the razor-sharp metal loop by agonizing loop. You love playing the piano so much? Then use your mangled fingers to play a requiem for Lola in hell. But Lola just thinks a piano tuned a half-step down sounds so much gentler. Lola rubbed her reddened eyes, letting a single, perfect tear slide down her cheek. She clutched a heavy steel tuning wrench to her chest. Her voice was thick with exaggerated, nasal innocence. Lola just wanted everyone's audition pieces to sound like sweet lullabies. Why are you yelling at Lola? That sickeningly sweet, infantile tone instantly triggered the protective instincts of every guy in the room. My childhood best friend, Oliver, stepped forward and shielded Lola with his body. He glared at me and let out a furious snarl. Violet, do you know anything besides grinding away at those keys? Lola is doing this for our own good. She's trying to help us relax before the biggest audition of our lives. Do you have zero empathy? Are you only happy when everyone else is having a mental breakdown from the stress? The rest of our classmates swarmed around them, their voices rising in a chorus of toxic accusations. Seriously. She's just a mindless practice machine. Zero artistic soul. So what if the pitch is a little flat? I'm naturally gifted. I could play on a broken keyboard and still ace the audition. She's just a tryhard who is insanely jealous of Lola. What a total buzzkill. She's clinically insane for ruining the vibe. Listening to those familiar, ear-piercing insults, a violent wave of vertigo washed over my brain. I was reborn. I was back to the exact day before the National Conservatory auditions. The moment Lola secretly detuned every grand piano in the practice wing, and the exact second I tried to stop her. Lola was a filthy rich heiress who transferred to our academy 6 months ago. When she first arrived, her habit of referring to herself in the third person made people roll their eyes. But within a month, her massive trust fund and constant damsel in distress act had turned her into the undisputed princess of the senior class. Even Oliver, the boy I grew up with, the boy who once promised to protect me forever, had devolved into her most loyal, rabid attack dog. In my past life, I tried to warn them. I told them the conservatory judges had absolute perfect pitch. I warned them that a detuned piano would destroy the emotional resonance of their pieces and result in automatic disqualification. For my honesty, I was viciously bullied by the entire class. They called me a jealous, talentless hack. Terrified for everyone's future, I secretly alerted the faculty. The professors brought in professional tuners overnight to fix the damage. When Lola realized her gentle aesthetic was gone, she threw a massive hysterical fit. That night, she swallowed a handful of prescription pills and slipped into a permanent, fatal coma. Weeks later, at our graduation gala, my classmates spiked my drink with a lethal dose of cleaning chemicals. I woke up tied to a chair in the music hall. Oliver wrapped heavy, steel piano wire around my hands. He pulled the wire taut, slowly crushing the bones in my fingers until my hands were completely mangled. He looked down at my bleeding, ruined hands and sneered. You love playing the piano so much? Then use your crippled fingers to play a requiem for Lola in hell. The phantom agony of my bones splintering still burned deep in my soul. In this life, I absolutely refused to be their savior. I took a deep breath, forcing down the bile rising in my throat. I looked at Lola and lowered my head submissively. You're right. I'm sorry. I overreacted. Lola is totally right. A gentle, soft aesthetic is way more important than rigid, boring pitch rules. I promise I won't interfere with your art again. A wave of mocking laughter echoed through the practice room. Look at her folding. So much for acting like a music prodigy. Exactly. Trying to show off her ear training? Next to Lola's aesthetic vision, your textbook theory is pure garbage. Lola wiped her eyes, pasting on a saintly, forgiving smile. Don't be mean to Violet, guys. Lola knows that everyone's ears are different. Some people just have a really low capacity for true beauty. Please don't ostracize Violet just because her taste is so basic. It sounded like she was defending me, but she was expertly branding me as a tasteless, uncultured loser. I didn't argue. I just silently walked back to my piano bench. In my previous life, my scores were just a few points shy of a full ride to Juilliard. My technique was peerless among my age group. But to these trust fund kids, I was just a pathetic piano slave who had to work for what they thought they were born with. Right now, the only thing on my mind was tomorrow's audition. I was going to take back my rightful spot as the top recruit in the state, and permanently leave these lunatics in my rearview mirror. As soon as I sat down, a thick, heavy hand clamped down on my wrist like a vice. Violet, your pathetic acting doesn't fool me. Oliver leaned in close, his breath hot against my face. You're totally plotting something. You're just waiting for us to leave so you can run and snitch to the department head, aren't you? The atmosphere in the room instantly turned toxic. Dozens of hostile eyes locked onto me like laser sights. Oliver tightened his grip, his voice booming off the soundproof walls. You are so incredibly fake. You're probably cursing Lola in your head right now. You think if you report her for vandalism, you'll eliminate your biggest competition, right? You want the board to disqualify Lola just so you can finally achieve your pathetic little music dream. His baseless, psychotic accusations instantly ignited the class. The practice room exploded into a frenzy. Oh my god, her heart is literally black. Lola literally just offended you, and you want to ruin her entire life? Classic snake behavior. Lola's kindness is totally wasted on trash like her. We can't let her leave. We need to teach her a lesson today so she doesn't try to sabotage us tomorrow. Someone shouted the order, and a group of guys aggressively stormed over to my piano. They moved with brutal efficiency. One of them snatched my thick binder of sheet music right off the music stand. It was the repertoire I had spent 3 grueling years perfecting. The margins were filled with thousands of handwritten notes from masterclasses and late-night practice sessions. What are you even practicing for? Trash like you doesn't deserve to touch a piano. A sharp, violent tearing sound ripped through the air. They tore my sheet music in half with their bare hands. The shredded pages fluttered through the air like dead winter leaves. The entire class erupted into roaring cheers. Not a single person thought this was wrong. A few girls even walked over and intentionally dug their expensive heels into my ruined notes. Trash paper for a trash person. Perfect match. The rage boiling in my chest threatened to override my sanity, but I bit down on my lower lip so hard I tasted copper. Fighting back now would only give them an excuse to physically lock me in a closet and make me miss the exam entirely. I violently yanked my wrist out of Oliver's grip and bent down to gather the torn, dirty pages. Oliver lifted his heavy sneaker and stomped down hard on the back of my hand. I told you. As long as I'm breathing, you aren't going anywhere near the faculty office. I will never let you hurt Lola. Just as the mob was gearing up to humiliate me further, the heavy wooden door of the practice room swung open. Professor Harrison, the head of the piano department, walked in carrying a clipboard with the final audition roster. He froze in the doorway, completely stunned by the chaotic scene. What the hell is going on in here? He slammed his clipboard onto the lid of the nearest grand piano. The loud, hollow bang echoed like a gunshot. Tomorrow is the state conservatory audition. The best musicians in the country are making their final preparations, and you lot are in here forming a lynch mob? Professor Harrison's sharp eyes scanned the room. His gaze locked onto Oliver's shoe pressing down on my hand. His face turned dangerously dark. Get back to your seats. Now. Oliver reluctantly lifted his foot, shooting me a lethal glare and dragging his thumb across his throat before backing away. Lola immediately trotted over to Professor Harrison. She gently tugged on the sleeve of his tweed jacket, her eyes pooling with fresh, glistening tears. Professor, please don't be mad. It's all Lola's fault. Everyone has been working so hard and getting so stressed. Lola just wanted everyone to hear a softer, gentler tone to help ease their anxiety. Lola just loves everyone so much. I wanted to give them a beautiful memory before we all graduate. Her pathetic, whimpering routine instantly melted the hearts of the guys standing nearby. A few of the top-ranked students in the class loudly voiced their support. Professor, we are engaging in experimental artistic exploration. Is it a crime to pursue a different tonal aesthetic? We are the elite musicians of this academy. Being a little flat isn't going to stop us from getting perfect scores. We aren't robots. Professor Harrison looked at the bizarre, unified front his students were presenting. He clearly assumed this was just a case of collective pre-exam burnout. His deeply furrowed brow relaxed slightly, and his tone softened. All right. I know you all share a tight bond. But sit down and listen to me. Professor Harrison cleared his throat, his expression turning dead serious. The audition panel has been updated. The head judge tomorrow is Maestro Rossi. The man has absolute, flawless perfect pitch. As your mentor, I am giving you one final warning. For tomorrow's repertoire, pitch accuracy is your absolute lifeline. You must pay extreme attention to the piano's tuning. If you suspect the pitch is off by even a fraction, you must immediately halt and request the official tuner. Even a quarter step flat sounds like a chainsaw ripping through drywall to judges of that caliber. Do not delude yourselves into thinking your technique can mask a flat instrument. If the pitch is wrong, your entire emotional delivery collapses into a complete mess. 1 point will be the difference between Juilliard and working at a local diner. Do not fail on the absolute basics. To emphasize his point, he casually walked over to the primary Steinway grand piano at the front of the room and struck a standard middle A. The note rang out. It was a flat, dull A flat. Professor Harrison's face drained of all color, turning from pale to a furious shade of purple. The pitch is completely wrong. Who touched this instrument? His voice skyrocketed, shaking with uncontainable rage. This is the primary warm-up room for tomorrow's auditions. Do you have any idea what precise tuning means to a concert pianist? Without a standard pitch, how are you supposed to warm up your ears? How are you supposed to find your center? Lola stepped out of the crowd, wearing that same clueless, innocent smile. Professor, Lola paid a guy to tune it down. Lola thinks it sounds so much softer this way. It makes everyone feel so emotionally stable. She looked at him with wide, expectant eyes, genuinely waiting for a gold star and a pat on the head. Professor Harrison froze like he had been struck by lightning. He stared at Lola in pure disbelief, his finger trembling as he pointed at the Steinway. You detuned a concert grand by a full half-step? Lola, tomorrow is the most rigorous conservatory audition in the state. What do you think this place is? Your personal playground? Lola's smile vanished. Her lower lip quivered, and the tears immediately spilled over. Lola just wanted to make the world a gentler place. In your eyes, are a bunch of rigid, dead rules more important than our happiness? This is absolute insanity. You are playing Russian roulette with your futures. Professor Harrison violently slammed his hand onto the piano lid. Call the academy tuner right now and fix this. If you don't, I will personally report you to the board and have your audition eligibility revoked on the spot. A few of the students who had been cheering earlier suddenly looked incredibly nervous. When their actual college admissions were on the line, the bravado started to crack. Yeah, Lola, maybe we should fix it. If the judges are really that strict about pitch, this is super risky. But Lola just cried harder. She collapsed onto the hardwood floor in a heap of designer fabric, sobbing hysterically. Lola just wants to share true beauty with the world. Is it a crime to pursue art? Oliver couldn't take it anymore. He shoved Professor Harrison aside and wrapped his arms around Lola, pulling her into his chest. Back off, old man. Did Violet bribe you to come in here and terrorize us? Professor Harrison was so furious he couldn't even form words. Oliver brutally cut him off, his face twisting with arrogance. Cut the crap. You just want to keep your precious admission stats high so you can get your corporate bonus. Lola is trying to save our artistic souls, and you just want us to be mindless exam robots. We are prodigies. Even if the pitch is a half-step flat, we will dominate those judges with our raw emotional power. Fired up by Oliver's unhinged speech, the class's blind arrogance came roaring back. He's right. Those judges are ancient anyway. Their hearing is probably shot. What we are doing is called avant-garde styling. Violet definitely snitched to the professor because she knows we're going to outplay her. What a manipulative psycho. Professor Harrison was shaking with a rage so intense his face was flushed crimson. With the exam less than 12 hours away, he knew escalating this to security would result in a massive scandal that he couldn't control. Fine. Have it your way. Professor Harrison snatched his clipboard and stormed toward the door, leaving them with one final, icy warning. Since you all think pitch is a joke, go ahead and see what happens tomorrow. Do not come crawling back to my office crying when reality hits you. The second the door clicked shut, Oliver's true colors flared. He lunged across the room, grabbing my jaw with a brutal, crushing grip. Did you enjoy the show, Violet? His fingers dug painfully into my cheeks. Tears involuntarily pricked the corners of my eyes from the sheer force. Tell me, did you slip the old man a text while we weren't looking? He tilted his head, his eyes burning with absolute, nauseating disgust. I am warning you. Drop the pathetic little schemes. Even if you complain to the president of the academy, it won't do a thing. Didn't you just see us run that old coward out of the room? Don't think that just because you practice 20 hours a day, you can play savior and boss Lola around. Lola stood up, dusting off her skirt. She wrapped her arms around Oliver's bicep and spoke in her saccharine voice. Oliver, don't be so mean to Violet. But you know. Lola feels like if we really want to promote this gentle aesthetic, just tuning this one room definitely isn't enough. She turned her head, a flash of psychotic obsession gleaming in her eyes. Why don't we detune every single piano in the audition building? That way, every candidate in the state can experience Lola's beautiful aesthetic. Her absurd, insane proposal plunged the noisy room into dead silence. The students who had been cheering just moments ago suddenly looked conflicted and deeply terrified. Lola, messing with our own practice room is one thing, but if we mess with the official exam pianos, that's a massive federal-level academic crime. If they catch us on the security cameras, or if we get caught in the act, our lives are literally over. We'll be blacklisted forever. A quiet girl in the back whispered, her voice trembling violently. This was the state audition. It was the moment that decided their entire careers. The atmosphere in the room turned suffocatingly tense as everyone mentally weighed the risks. At that critical moment, Oliver shoved my face away and stepped up like a conquering hero. What are you all so afraid of? An exam this big has maintenance staff checking the rooms constantly. If we tune them down tonight, and they don't notice tomorrow morning, it proves the judges don't actually care about pitch. If they do notice, they'll just fix it before the exam starts. He beat his chest, his voice echoing off the walls. We are doing this to help Lola achieve her ultimate artistic vision. We are going to give those rigid, boring judges the surprise of a lifetime. This is performance art. Hearing his twisted logic, the crowd found their psychological safety net. Their hesitation vanished, replaced by a sick, fanatical fever. He's right. The judges aren't deaf. They'll definitely double-check the rooms. Let's go. Let's go bless the whole state with Lola's aesthetic. Let's show everyone what true art is. For Lola's dream. Let's go. The entire class looked completely brainwashed. Cheering and screaming, they swarmed around Lola and Oliver, sprinting out of the room like a pack of rabid animals heading for the audition halls. The heavy double doors of the practice wing swung shut, the click of the brass latch sounding like the drop of a guillotine. Violet stood alone in the center of the room. Around her, the floor was littered with the shredded remnants of her 3-year repertoire. The margins, once filled with precise, penciled notations, crescendo marks, subtle pedal adjustments, and private encouragements from her late mother, were now nothing but jagged scraps of paper. She knelt slowly, her knees pressing against the cold, polished parquet. The physical memory of her past life, the agonizing phantom pain of steel piano wire, slicing through the flesh and bone of her fingers, flared up, causing her hands to tremble. But as she picked up a torn page from Chopin's Ballade No. 4 in F minor, the trembling stopped. In her past life, she had screamed, fought, and begged. She had tried to save them from their own stupidity, only to be branded a jealous villain and murdered in a dark rehearsal hall while they toasted to Lola's memory. This time, she wouldn't shed a single tear. Violet quietly gathered the torn sheets, stacking them into a neat, damaged pile. She didn't need the paper. Every note, every shift in tempo, and every weight of the hammer was burned into her mind. She had played these pieces tens of thousands of times across 2 lifetimes. She walked over to the Steinway grand piano that Lola had detuned. She pressed a single key, middle C. The note was flat, dragging down toward a B. But worse than the pitch being flat was the temperament. Lola's hired tuner, or perhaps the classmates themselves, had simply turned the tuning pins without understanding the physics of an acoustic piano. An acoustic piano has up to 3 steel strings for a single note in the treble and mid-range. To make a piano sound flat but clean, all 3 strings of a single note must be tuned precisely to the same lower frequency. But Lola's amateur attempt had left the strings uneven. One string was flat, another was slightly sharper, and the third was vibrating at a completely different frequency. When Violet struck the key, the result wasn't a gentle, soft lullaby. It was a hideous, vibrating, beat effect, a sour, metallic chorusing that sounded like a dying animal. Violet let out a cold, quiet laugh. Avant-garde styling? A softer aesthetic? They had no idea what they had done. They were about to march into the most prestigious audition of their lives, carrying a weapon of self-destruction, thinking it was a crown of laurels. Violet took her ruined music binder, slipped it into her backpack, and walked out of the academy. That night, she didn't practice on a physical piano. She sat in her small, quiet apartment, closed her eyes, and practiced in her mind. Mental practice, Vorstellung, was a technique used by the world's greatest virtuosos. She visualized her hands moving over the keys, not in the standard key of F minor, but mentally transposing the entire piece. If the grand pianos in the audition hall were tuned a half-step flat, playing the written notes of Chopin's Ballade No. 4 in F minor would sound like E minor. To the judges, E minor changed the entire emotional color, the resonance of the open strings, and the acoustic design of the piano. More importantly, to a judge like Maestro Rossi, who possessed legendary absolute perfect pitch, hearing a piece performed in the wrong key without permission was an automatic, unforgivable insult to the composer. If they want flat, Violet thought, her eyes snapping open in the dark, I will give them perfection. I will transpose the entire masterpiece up a half-step on the fly. To play one of the most technically demanding pieces in the classical repertoire, transposing it from F minor to F sharp minor in real time, on an instrument with uneven string tension, was a feat of absolute, terrifying genius. It was something only a handful of living legends could even attempt. She would be one of them. While Violet practiced in the silence of her mind, the darkness of the state conservatory was alive with frantic, whispered activity. Lola stood in the corridor of the main audition building, clutching her designer handbag like a shield. Her face was flushed with a mixture of childish excitement and nervous adrenaline. Oliver. Lola is scared, she whimpered, tugging on the sleeve of his leather jacket. What if the security guard catches us? Lola doesn't want to go to jail. Lola just wanted everyone to hear the beautiful, gentle sounds. Oliver's heart melted. He put his arm around her shoulders, his voice dripping with protective arrogance. Don't worry, sweetheart. The security guard is on our payroll. I gave him $1,000 from my dad's account to take a nap in his break room for the next 3 hours. Nobody is coming. Are you sure? Lola blinked her large, watery eyes. But Violet looked so angry. What if she tells on us? Violet is a talentless, jealous coward, Oliver sneered, his eyes darkening at the mention of his childhood friend. She's probably crying in her room right now, trying to tape her stupid notes back together. Even if she tries to snitch, who's going to believe her? We have the entire senior class here. If she says anything, we'll just say she's mentally unstable and trying to sabotage our chances. Behind them, a dozen classmates carried professional tuning wrenches, flashlights, and plastic wedges. They were the elite of the academy, trust fund. Kids who had spent their lives being told they were geniuses, too lazy to master the grueling discipline of ear training, but desperate for the prestige of a conservatory spot. Let's move, one of the boys whispered. We have 6 audition rooms to cover. The group split up, slipping into the locked audition halls. In audition room 1 sat a magnificent, 9-foot Steinway Model D concert grand, the crown jewel of the conservatory. Its soundboard was made of premium Bavarian spruce, capable of projecting a delicate whisper or a thundering fortissimo to the back of a 2,000-seat hall. Oliver walked up to it, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. He popped open the heavy maple lid, exposing the pristine gold-painted plate and the rows of glittering steel pins. All right, Oliver said, handing a tuning wrench to one of his friends. A full half step down. Just turn each pin counterclockwise until the tuner app shows it's flat. Wait, Oliver, the boy hesitated, holding the wrench over a pin. Should we do the unisons? Each note has 3 strings. If we don't tune them exactly the same, it's going to sound completely out. Who cares? Oliver brushed him off impatiently. The judges aren't going to notice a slight wobble. Lola said it makes the sound shimmer. Just get it done. We don't have all night. With clumsy, brutal movements, they began turning the pins. The delicate, highly pressurized environment of the concert grand was subjected to violent, uneven tension drops. The soundboard groaned under the sudden uneven release of nearly 40,000 pounds of string tension. In their ignorance, they thought they were creating art. In reality, they were mutilating masterpieces of acoustic engineering. Lola stood in the doorway, a sweet, vacant smile playing on her lips. Lola is so happy, she whispered to herself. Tomorrow, everyone will finally understand Lola's soul. The morning of the National Conservatory auditions arrived with a cold, gray mist that hung over the city. The grand lobby of the State Conservatory was packed with nervous young musicians from across the country. The air was thick with the scent of damp wool, coats, expensive coffee, and the sharp, metallic tang of anxiety. Violet arrived early. She wore a simple, dark gray wool coat and carried nothing but her backpack. Her fingers were warm in her pockets, her mind calm and clear. As she entered the lobby, a sudden hush fell over the group from her academy. Lola was holding court in the center of the room, dressed in a pristine white designer dress that made her look like a delicate swan. She was surrounded by Oliver and their classmates, who were laughing and boasting. Look who decided to show up, Oliver said loudly, stepping in front of Violet as she tried to walk past the piano slave. I'm surprised you didn't run to the administration building this morning, Violet. Did you sleep at all, or were you too busy memorizing page numbers? Violet stopped. She looked up at Oliver, her eyes completely devoid of the warmth and affection they had held for 10 years of their childhood. I slept very well, Oliver, she said, her voice quiet and steady. Oliver flinched slightly. The absolute coldness in her gaze was unfamiliar. In the past, whenever he raised his voice, she would look hurt, desperate to explain herself, desperate to regain his approval. Now, she looked at him as if he were nothing but a minor inconvenience. Don't act tough with me, Oliver muttered, leaning in. Just remember, keep your mouth shut during the audition. If you say a single word about the pianos to the judges, I will personally make sure you never find work in this industry. My father sits on the board of the State Philharmonic. One word from him, and you're blacklisted. Lola doesn't want you to be blacklisted, Violet, Lola chimed in, stepping forward with a pout. Lola just wants you to be happy. If you play nicely today, Lola might even let you be her accompanist for the spring recital. The surrounding classmates burst into snickers. Accompanist? That's the perfect job for a machine like her. No soul, just rhythm. Yeah, let the real artists take the spotlight. Violet didn't argue. She simply looked at Lola's delicate, manicured hands, then at Oliver's smug, arrogant face. I wish you both the absolute best of luck today, Violet said, a faint, inscrutable smile touching her lips. I hope your performances are exactly what you deserve. Before they could process the strange weight of her words, the heavy oak doors of the main hall opened. A stern-faced proctor stepped out, holding a clipboard. Attention, candidates. The National Conservatory auditions are now officially open. When your name is called, please proceed to your assigned audition room. The head judge for Hall A is Maestro Giovanni Rossi. A collective shiver ran through the crowd. Maestro Rossi was a legend. A former child prodigy, he was known as the Inquisitor of the classical music world. He possessed a rare form of absolute perfect pitch. He could identify the frequency of a falling coin down to the exact hertz. He was notoriously intolerant of technical sloppiness, but he reserved his deepest hatred for musicians who lacked respect for the composer's original intent. Oliver smirked, nudging Lola. Perfect. A legend is going to witness your genius, Lola. Let's go show them what avant-garde really means. The auditions in Hall A commenced. The judges sat in the middle of the empty, cavernous auditorium, shrouded in shadow. In the center of the elevated stage, the 9-foot Steinway grand piano stood under a single, harsh spotlight. The first candidate from Violet's class to be called was Marcus, a cocky young pianist who had spent the last month bragging about his rendition of Liszt's La Campanella. Marcus walked onto the stage, gave a theatrical bow to the darkened auditorium, and sat down at the piano. He adjusted his bench with a flourish, took a deep, dramatic breath, and brought his hands down onto the keys for the famous high-pitched opening octave leaps. Clang. The sound that erupted from the Steinway was not the bright, crystalline, bell-like tone of Liszt's masterpiece. It was a sour, vibrating, discordant screech. Because the high treble strings had been detuned unevenly, the 3 strings of the high D sharp were fighting against each other. The result was a horrific wolf tone, a metallic, wobbling frequency that sounded like a saw hitting a rusty nail. In the shadows of the auditorium, Maestro Rossi's posture instantly stiffened. His head snapped up, his brow furrowing into a deep, dangerous V. Marcus, however, was so blinded by his own arrogance and the gentle aesthetic ideology that he kept playing. He assumed the sourness was just the raw emotional resonance Lola had promised. He threw his weight into the keys, speeding up. But the faster he played, the worse it got. The rapid, high-pitched repetition of notes turned into a chaotic, muddy soup of clashing frequencies. The piano sounded like it was physically screaming in agony. Stop. A voice like dry paper snapping cut through the hall. Marcus's hands froze on the keys. He blinked into the darkness of the auditorium. Excuse me? What? Maestro Rossi said, his voice quiet but vibrating with absolute disgust. Are you doing? I am performing Liszt's La Campanella, Maestro, Marcus stammered, his confidence suddenly faltering. No, Rossi said, rising slowly from his seat. You are committing a crime against acoustic science. Are you deaf, young man? Maestro, the tone is a modern, softer interpretation. It is flat by 47 cents. Rossi roared, his voice echoing off the high ceiling. And it is tempered like a broken street accordion. The unisons are completely out of phase. It is physically painful to listen to. Did you not warm up? Did your ears not tell you that this instrument is severely damaged? I thought. Get off my stage, Rossi hissed. If you cannot tell the difference between a tuned concert grand and a garbage disposal, you have no business occupying space in this conservatory. Disqualified. Next. Marcus's face turned as white as paper. He stumbled off the stage, his hands shaking so violently he could barely open the door. In the waiting room, the tension shifted instantly. The smug smiles on the classmates' faces began to curdle into sheer terror. What happened? Oliver demanded as Marcus collapsed onto a bench, staring blankly at the floor. Why did he stop you? The pitch, Marcus whispered, his eyes wide with horror. He said the pitch is completely wrong. He said it sounds like a garbage disposal. He's just an old fossil. Oliver hissed, though a cold sweat was starting to break out on his forehead. He doesn't understand modern artistic expression. Don't worry, Lola. When you go up, your emotional delivery will force them to understand. Next was Oliver. Oliver was scheduled to play Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor, a piece famous for its dark, thunderous, bell-like chords. He walked onto the stage, his heart hammering against his ribs. He looked at the Steinway. Up close, under the hot spotlight, the instrument looked like a sleeping beast. Oliver sat down. He struck the opening 3-chord motif, the famous fortissimo descent. Bum. 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 The chords, which should have sounded like the majestic, terrifying tolling of Kremlin bells sounded like a muddy, wet cardboard box being beaten with a stick. Because the middle and bass registers had been detuned by a full half step, the resonance was completely deadened. The strings, lacking the proper tension, flapped weakly against the soundboard. Maestro Rossi physically winced, covering his ears with his hands. Stop. Stop this instant. Oliver stopped, his chest heaving. Maestro. This is a dark, somber interpretation. The flat pitch enhances the tragedy of Rachmaninoff's vision. Rachmaninoff was a composer with absolute pitch who wrote in C-sharp minor. Rossi shouted, stepping into the light at the edge of the stage. What you are playing is in C minor, and it sounds like a wet sponge. The bass strings are flaccid. There is no projection, no clarity, no art. It is an abomination. You don't understand. Oliver yelled, his arrogance turning into desperate panic. We did this on purpose. We are trying to break free from your rigid, archaic rules. Lola said. Who is Lola? Rossi cut him off, his voice ice cold. Before Oliver could answer, the proctor stepped forward, whispering into Rossi's ear. Rossi's eyes widened, then narrowed into slits of pure, lethal fury. Vandalism, Rossi whispered, the word carrying a terrifying weight. You alter the instruments? It's not vandalism. It's art. Oliver screamed as two security guards stepped onto the stage, grabbing him by the arms. Let go of me. Do you know who my father is? He'll have you fired. Get this lunatic out of my sight, Rossi commanded. And call the police. I want a full investigation into the state of every piano in this building. The backstage area was in complete chaos. The students who had participated in the detuning were weeping, arguing, and trying to slip out of the building, only to find that the security staff had locked the main exit doors waiting for the police to arrive. Lola was sitting on the floor, her beautiful white dress stained with dust, sobbing hysterically. Lola just wanted to make the world gentler. Why is everyone being so mean to Lola? Oliver, escorted by police officers in handcuffs, was screaming profanities as he was led down the corridor. Amidst the screaming and the madness, the proctor's voice called out over the PA system. Candidate number 14, Violet. Violet stood up. She brushed a speck of dust off her simple dark trousers, picked up her backpack, and walked past her weeping classmates. Violet. Lola looked up, her face red and swollen, her nose running. Violet. Please, tell them. Tell them it was an artistic choice. They'll believe you. You're the top student. Violet stopped and looked down at Lola. I told you yesterday, Lola, Violet said, her voice soft and perfectly calm. I promise I won't interfere with your art again. You wanted a flat piano. You got exactly what you wanted. With that, Violet turned her back on her and walked through the heavy doors onto the stage. The atmosphere in Hall A was suffocatingly tense. The panel of judges looked exhausted and furious. Maestro Rossi was pacing back and forth at the front of the stage, his hands clenched behind his back. Maestro, the proctor said nervously. Should we suspend the auditions? The piano tuners say it will take at least 6 hours to pull all the instruments back to standard pitch. No, Rossi snapped. We have 50 more candidates waiting. If we cancel today, the state board will pull our funding. We must proceed. He looked up as Violet walked onto the stage. Another one from that wretched academy. Let's get this disaster over with. Violet walked to the center of the stage. She did not bow theatrically. She simply bowed with deep, quiet respect to the judges and the instrument. She sat down at the Steinway. The air around the piano smelled of warm wood and the faint, bitter scent of metal polish. She placed her hands on the keys. She could feel the uneven slack in the key action. Because the string tension had been dropped so violently and unevenly, the keys felt spongy, lacking their usual crisp, responsive rebound. She had two choices. She could play Chopin's Ballade No. 4 in F minor as written. But on this piano, it would sound in E minor, flat, muddy, and out of tune. Rossi would disqualify her within 10 seconds. Or, she could perform a miracle. She closed her eyes. In her mind's eye, the keyboard shifted. The black and white keys morphed. F minor became F sharp minor. Every single chord, every delicate arpeggio, every lightning-fast run, and every complex polyrhythm would have to be transposed up a half step in real time. Her fingers, which had practiced the F minor fingering for years, would have to adapt instantly to the completely different physical geography of F sharp minor. And she would have to do it while compensating for the unevenly tuned strings. Adjusting her physical touch, striking some keys lighter, others heavier, to mask the beating of the out-of-tune unisons. She opened her eyes. She pressed the pedal. And then, she began to play. The opening chords of the ballade, the gentle, questioning introduction, rang out. But they did not sound flat. Because Violet was transposing the piece up a half step, the sound that reached Maestro Rossi's ears was in the exact, correct key of F minor. Rossi, who had been pacing with his back to the stage, froze. He slowly turned around, his eyes widening in absolute, stunned disbelief. The music was flowing from the piano like liquid gold. It was Chopin's F minor. But it was unlike any rendition Rossi had ever heard. The tone was incredibly delicate, yet projected with an intense, shimmering clarity. Violet's fingers were flying across the keys like pale spiders. Her touch was miraculous. She was playing with a hypersensitive awareness of the instruments. Damage. Whenever she hit a note where the three strings were badly out of tune with each other, she used an incredibly rapid, light staccatissimo or a subtle half pedal to damp the clashing frequencies before they could create a wolf tone. She was physically sculpting the sound in mid-air, utilizing the resonance of the soundboard to blend the discordant frequencies into a rich, lush, celestial chorus. The other judges on the panel slowly stood up from their seats, staring at the stage as if they were seeing a ghost. Is she? One judge whispered, his voice trembling. Is she transposing? F sharp minor, Rossi whispered, his voice shaking with a mixture of awe and terror. She is playing the ballade in F sharp minor. To make it sound in F minor on a detuned piano. That's impossible, the judge gasped. The brain cannot process that level of transposition on the fly. The muscle memory alone would collapse. She isn't just transposing, Rossi said, his eyes watering as he listened to the gorgeous, soaring climax of the piece. She is compensating for the dead action. She is adjusting her velocity on every individual key to balance the uneven string tension. This is not a student. Rossi walked slowly toward the stage, drawn by the sheer, hypnotic beauty of the music. This is a master. Violet was entirely lost in the music. In her mind, the phantom pain of her broken fingers dissolved, replaced by the thundering, triumphant chords of the ballade's coda. The coda was a technical tempest, a whirlwind of double thirds, rapid scales, and massive leaps that pushed even the greatest pianists to their absolute physical limits. She played it with an explosive, untamed ferocity. The flat piano, under her magical touch, did not sound weak or broken. It sounded like an ancient, powerful entity being brought back to life. With one final, earth-shattering chord, the piece ended. Violet held the pedal, letting the final, complex resonance ring out through the high ceiling of the hall, slowly dissolving into the silence. She lifted her hands from the keys. For 3 seconds, there was absolute, breathless silence. Then, Maestro Rossi began to clap. He didn't just clap. He ran to the front of the stage, his hands smacking together with a thunderous force. Bravo! Rossi shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. Bravo! Absolute genius! The rest of the panel joined in, their applause echoing through the empty auditorium. Violet stood up, took a deep, elegant bow, and looked at Maestro Rossi. Rossi walked to the edge of the stage, looking up at her with tears in his eyes. Tell me your name, young lady. Violet, Maestro. Violet, Rossi said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. In my 50 years of music, I have never witnessed a feat of such profound musical intelligence and technical wizardry. To play on a ruined instrument and force it to produce such heavenly art, you are a miracle. Thank you, Maestro, Violet said quietly. You are not just accepted to this conservatory, Rossi said, his voice trembling. I am personally calling the president of the Juilliard School this afternoon. You belong on the global stage. Your journey begins today. The fallout of the National Conservatory auditions was swift, brutal, and complete. The police investigation, aided by the security footage that Oliver's bribe had failed to erase, as the security guard, terrified of being accessory to a federal academic crime, immediately handed over the backup hard drives to the police, revealed the entire plot. Lola, Oliver, and 12 other students from the academy were caught on high-definition cameras carrying tuning wrenches into the audition rooms. The damage to the 6 concert grand pianos was assessed at over $200,000. The Steinway Model D, the conservatory's pride, required a complete rebuild of its pin block and soundboard due to the sudden, violent tension drop. Because the conservatory was a state-funded institution, the charge was not just simple vandalism, it was destruction of state property and grand larceny. Oliver's father, the powerful board member of the State Philharmonic, tried to use his influence to sweep the scandal under the rug. But Maestro Rossi, furious at the desecration of the instruments, went directly to the national press. The headline on the front page of the National Arts Journal read, "Spoiled Heiress and Academy elites mutilate Steinways in bizarre art protest. The public backlash was immense. Oliver's father was forced to resign from the board of the Philharmonic in disgrace. The family's assets were frozen to pay for the massive civil lawsuits filed by the conservatory. Oliver was expelled from the academy, his academic record permanently stained with a criminal record. His dreams of a musical career were completely, irrevocably dead. Lola's fate was even worse. Her family's massive trust fund could not shield her from the global humiliation. The princess of the senior class was exposed to the world as a spoiled, delusional vandal. When she tried to throw her characteristic hysterical fit in court, whimpering in the third person, crying that Lola just wanted to make the world gentler, the judge was completely unmoved. "This is not a playground, Miss Vance," the judge said coldly. "Your actions have destroyed valuable public assets and ruined the lives of your peers. You are sentenced to 2 years of youth detention and 500 hours of community service." As Lola was led away in handcuffs, screaming for Oliver, Oliver didn't even look at her. He sat on the defense bench, his head in his hands, realizing that he had thrown away his entire life, his family's honor, and his childhood friend, for a girl who was nothing but a hollow, psychotic shell. 3 months later, the evening of the Academy's graduation gala arrived. In her past life, this was the night Violet had been poisoned, her fingers crushed with piano wire in the dark. This time, the atmosphere was completely different. The grand hall of the Academy was decorated with gold and white silk. The remaining students and faculty were dressed in formal attire, but the mood was somber. The seats reserved for the top students of the senior class, Oliver, Lola, Marcus, were completely empty. Violet sat at the VIP table, next to Professor Harrison and Maestro Rossi, who had flown in specifically to watch her perform. She wore a stunning midnight blue silk gown. Her hands, smooth and unblemished, rested gently on her lap. "Are you ready, Violet?" Maestro Rossi asked, his tone warm and fatherly. "Yes, Maestro," Violet smiled. "I've been waiting for this performance my entire life." She stood up and walked toward the stage. As she did, she saw a figure standing in the shadows near the back exit of the hall. It was Oliver. He looked unrecognizable. He had lost weight, his face pale and hollow, his clothes wrinkled and cheap. He was no longer the arrogant, golden boy of the Academy. He was a ghost, sneaking into the gala just to catch a glimpse of the world he had lost. Their eyes met. In Oliver's eyes, there was a desperate, agonizing plea. He took a half step forward, his lips moving, trying to form her name. "Violet, please." Violet's gaze did not linger on him for even a fraction of a second. She looked through him as if he were nothing but a pane of dirty glass. She stepped onto the stage and sat down at the brand new, perfectly tuned Steinway grand piano. She did not play Chopin. She did not play Liszt. She played Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor. She struck the opening 3-chord motif. Bum. 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 The sound was thunderous, majestic, and terrifyingly beautiful. The pristine, perfect C-sharp minor chords rolled through the hall like a tidal wave of pure gold. It was the piece Oliver had tried to play. It was the piece he had mutilated. Now, Violet was playing it with an emotional depth and technical perfection that left the audience weeping. In the shadows of the back exit, Oliver fell to his knees. The music washed over him, each perfect note sounding like a beautiful, agonizing requiem for his own dead soul. He realized, with absolute, crushing clarity, that Violet had never been the piano slave. She was the queen. And he had destroyed himself trying to tear down her throne. Violet finished the final, quiet chord of the prelude. She stood up, the thunderous applause of the audience washed over her like a warm summer rain. She looked up at the glittering lights of the hall, her heart peaceful and free. Her past life was finally dead. And her masterpiece had just begun.